Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome to. Oh, before we start, I'd like to invite everyone to just make sure that your microphones are muted. Right. So welcome to a day in the life of a work from home Pythonista. I'm your host, Matt,
And Mickey.
and welcome. So a day in the life of a work from home Pythonista is a monthly virtual webinar talk show series where we interview Pythonistas representing various roles from developers, CTOs, data scientists, QA, network engineer, scientists, educators, and whoever, just to give people in the community an insight of what a typical workday looks like for these roles. Hopefully, this would also serve as an inspiration and give a sense of community, especially for those who are working from home. So, our our show format will be our guest will be presenting their from home setup and their process, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A portion. Then if you have questions for our guest, just type them on our chat and then we'll pick from the questions to read out and ask our guest speaker. So my co-host Miki will introduce our guest speaker.
Hello, everyone. Our guest speaker is Christine Balili, a data scientist. In her career so far, she has applied machine learning in mining. Matt, pamute niya naman. Sorry about that. She has applied machine learning in mining, commodities trading, telco, media, and retail. Her academic background is in computer science. She was previously a volunteer of Python Philippines and other tech communities in Manila. Outside of work, Christine's interests revolve around baking, reformer, Pilates, and tennis. Ayan, Christine, you can start your presentation.
Yep, thanks, Mickey. Let me just share my screen. Very good afternoon, I guess almost good evening to everyone back in Manila. Let me know if you guys can share my screen. Might see my screen. You see it? Okay.
You can see your screen.
Right. So, hi everyone. My name is Christine Balili, and as Mickey has mentioned, I am a data scientist. First of all, I would like to thank the PythonPH community for giving me this opportunity to share my experience working from home in the past couple of months, as well as share my experience and my journey so far in Python and more broadly as a woman in tech and as a data scientist. So hopefully you guys get some insights from this conversation and bring back to your work or to whatever you're doing, practical tips, new ideas, and hopefully we just have a really great conversation on working from home and Python in general. So yeah, I am a data scientist. I've been a data scientist professionally for the last 3 years. Right now, I'm working for a company called West Farmers. I'm based in Melbourne. So West Farmers is a retail conglomerate. They own like Kmart, Target, Officeworks, and a bunch of other iconic retail brands within Australia. And prior to West Farmers, I was a consultant doing data science work for McKinsey, where I have served clients in mining, telco, media, private equity, finance, and all sorts of different domains. And then very briefly in 2018, I had a gig at Thinking Machines Data Science for a couple of months. And then prior to that, I was in Korea doing my graduate studies in KAIST. And actually, right after I graduated from my bachelor's in UP, I did, I think, 8 months of work at Globe as a management associate. So that has been my professional journey so far. But right now, and at least in the next 5 years, I think I will be a data scientist as a formal title. Right. So as I've mentioned, I came from a computer science background. I did my computer science degree in UP. I graduated in 2015. And after that, I did a master's in a degree called Knowledge Service Engineering. Quite a handful, quite a mouthful of like a degree, but it's basically just advanced kind of master's in data science at KAIST in South Korea. I have published a couple of research publications, more recently into 2020. So if you go to Google Scholar and look for my name, you'll see those papers. And maybe you can cite them in your future work if you're an academic. And I am certified in both AWS and Azure. So I have a machine learning professional certification in AWS, and recently I've gotten the Azure Data Engineer Associate certification. I am passionate about the following. I'm passionate about women in tech and data science for social good. So if you guys are working on this space, I'd be interested to actually help out. Outside of work, my hobbies revolve around tennis. Like, I'm very beginner in tennis, but I really enjoy it. I play at least twice a week. I do reformer Pilates as my formal exercise, I guess. And now I'm in the process of learning how to swim. I didn't know how to swim before, and at 25 is the very first time that actually conquering my fear of the water and learning how to swim. And over the pandemic, I have gotten into the baking bug. So I learned how to bake breads, cookies, cakes over the pandemic. So I guess that's also a new hobby of mine. Yeah, so that's me from 4 different dimensions. I guess one thing that I would want to share with you all is I used to be a volunteer for Pycon back in 2014 and 2015. I was a volunteer in those 2 conferences. If you attended these conferences, I was the one delegated to handle the lunch. So you might remember me from those conferences, although I had a very bad haircut back then. So, but yes, I volunteered. And the highlight for me actually as a volunteer for Pycon is it is what inspired me to have and pursue a career in data science. In particular, there was this talk in 2014 where Steffi shared what data science is in Python, and that got me really inspired to like pursue that as a career and actually do graduate studies based off of that and make it my professional path. And also, it was just really fun to be amongst people who are passionate about Python and tech in general, being able to share ideas, be exposed to new ideas. So I'm very happy to look back at my time volunteering for Python and being back here now sharing my experiences so far. Oh yeah, so I am a data scientist, as I've mentioned, and these are the highlights of my career so far. So my areas of expertise include complex network analysis. So I did that as part of my research work in grad school, and a lot of my publications are around it. So this figure here, you see there's a heart-shaped thing. That's actually a complex network, and it shows 2 communities within that complex network diverging. So this complex network represents topics within biomedicine, and this is pink area is one topic, and this other pink area, red area is another topic. So they used to be one topic, and now over time they slowly diverge. So that was my research back in grad school. In my professional career as a data scientist, a lot of my time was spent working in mining, surprisingly. I worked in coal processing plants, lead and zinc processing plants in both Australia and the United States. So this is me in my PPE, protective gear or whatever. That's the official suit that you wear around when you work in a mining site. So I worked with metallurgists and mining operators to create like an advisory system that's driven by machine learning to help them optimize the way that they run the processing plants. So, in mining, you take stuff out of the earth, you process it to get the most purest form of that mineral. And so we help them optimize the processes within that plant to be able to get the most yield and throughput in mining. So I did that for lead and zinc and coal, metallurgical coal. And I also did work on price forecasting for a very important commodity. You can Google what that commodity is, but that's the picture. And we tried to predict like the price of that in the global markets, because that has implication in terms of like whether you short or long the stock for that particular commodity. I did churn models for a cable company, and that was really interesting work. And we've helped them tackle churn through explainable machine learning as well as predictive machine learning. And now my work revolves around e-commerce, so optimizing, adding incremental revenue to an e-commerce website through recommendation systems. So getting users to buy more by personalizing the products that you recommend on top of what they already put in their basket. So if there's one very fun fact about my work, I'm probably one of the very few data scientists globally who've had experience working in the Arctic, like actual North Pole. So yeah, now you've met a data scientist who've actually worked that far and very remotely. Yeah, so that's my tech career so far. And now I'm gonna give you a tour of my office. So my work from home setup has been like this. I have 2 physical spaces at home for work. This first space here that I'm showing is where I spent most of my working day. So I have my big monitor, a light lamp, my work laptop, phone, and a notebook, and a bunch of sticky notes. So just so that I don't forget things that I have to do and ideas that I've had during the day that I can come back to later. So the notebook is very important to me because in meetings, I take notes with actual physical analog devices rather than typing. And it just helped me process information better. I have my comfy seat. Actually, it's not very comfy, but I make the most out of it. I've added like a cushion because my back really hurts from like sitting for too long, and I'm trying to like not sit for too long now. Yeah, it's a very small, lean workspace, and it has served me for the past year very well. And my second space is where I am right now. You can see the green couch in the background. I've placed away my stuffed wombats because I thought it was inappropriate somewhere else. But I am in that space now, and it is where I get the most sunlight in my apartment. So yeah, and also it's near my plants, so I can just see some greenery in like a very urban environment. And I like this. I take my coffees here. Some meetings are taken in this space. And that's my physical space. My, I guess, digital space are revolve around these tools. So I primarily code in PyCharm and Jupyter. As a data scientist, you do a lot of your work in these IDEs. I do CI/CD and code versioning in GitLab, project management through Jira. I work with Snowflake as a data warehouse. And more recently, I have started working in SageMaker, actually using their APIs for training, tuning, and processing. Our company has provisioned AWS Workspace, which is kind of like a Linux box because we're provided with Windows machines. So if we need anything that requires Linux, we go and use AWS Workspaces. Confluence is for documentation. And of course, my primary tool of instant messaging would be Teams, because we're like a Microsoft-based organization. Yeah, so that's my workspace. Now, this is what my typical day looks like when working from home. I would just want to preface this that, you know, working from home is a privilege, and being a person who works from home without kids and without being in a multi-generational household is also a privilege for my part, because that minimizes the distractions that I've had. So this schedule here doesn't work for everyone. It comes with a lot of privilege to be able to do this. So just want to preface that, but this is how I typically work. So during the lockdown here in Melbourne, which happened in like, I think July to October, like the very heavy lockdown, level 4, where we're not allowed to move within beyond 5 kilometers and we're just stuck at home. So in the morning, I typically make or buy my coffee outside, eat breakfast, and check emails. And then at 9 a.m. is where I do my stand-ups. And then throughout the morning, I would typically revolve around meetings, code reviews, and actual focused work. Most of the time it's meetings, because I try to put my meetings in the morning. So in the afternoon, I actually have a long chunk of time that's focused on coding and focused analysis work. And then I have lunch. Then in the afternoon, as I've mentioned, that's where I do most of my work. And then dinner time. And in some days, I typically have some leftover work to do, maybe responding to an email or editing some slides or like passing on some analysis that I've done. I will do some leftover work after dinner. like for an hour or so. And on days where I'm mostly free, I actually either read or either watch something on TV, or if I'm being hardworking that day, I'll do some study time. Study time being taking courses online and actually reading blog posts on tech. So that's for weekdays. On weekends, I do housework. So, the clothes aren't going to wash themselves and the dishes aren't going to do themselves. So you have to like have this sense of maintenance and admin work and just cleaning up your space since you work and live there. And then in the afternoon, I either take a walk outside or watch something, or it's pretty much like any random thing I could think of that day. But I try to have some time to rest and be creative and not think about the work that I was doing the weekday. Yeah, so on Sundays, Sunday night or Sunday afternoon, I typically do meal prep. Well, in lockdown, I did a lot of meal prep and do plan my work days ahead of me for like the next week. So that was during lockdown. For the situation in Australia, in Melbourne particularly, we're not as hit by COVID. Like our community transitions are virtually zero. So we're kind of semi back to normal. So there are days when we have to go to the office. So on Tuesdays, I actually go to the office as well as on Fridays. But the schedule is pretty much the same. Maybe the only thing that is different is that I have now more time to do activities outside of the house. So I attend tennis classes, swimming classes, all these fitness classes that I'm taking. I do that now outside rather than virtually. So that's what's changed for me working from home. Yeah, so that's it. Some tips for me working from home, maybe like the general well-being and the growth stuff. I think you've heard that being said by multiple people throughout this pandemic, but I guess my value add here is the work tips. So tip number one, don't work from your bed. There's a psychological reason behind that, and you should separate your work and living space. Do your alignments with your coworkers in the morning. Block out time for focused work. Minimize notifications from work and personal instant messaging apps. You can break down your big pieces of work into smaller tasks and write them down in a piece of paper so you can tackle them one by one. Check the priority on your deliverables because often they change throughout the week or throughout the day even. So always check with your manager which is the priority if you're working with the manager. Decline meetings where your input is not needed and push back on meetings that can be emails. It's hard to do at first, but you have to do it. It's for your own benefits, for your own good. Document information and processes or workflow that are frequently asked from you in Confluence so your workers can DIY it themselves or have self-service. And then lastly, acknowledge that your coworkers have responsibilities beyond work. So you're often working with people who have kids, who are carers for their like older parents. So you have to recognize that people have boundaries, and with working from home, you need to have that additional layer of empathy and care for people you work with. So yeah, that's me. I will probably say that later, but I'll pass it on to Matt now for the questions.
Right. Wow. Thanks. Thanks, Christine, for those wonderful tips and even sharing your workspace and your work background. And wow, I haven't really. Yeah, you're probably the only data scientist I know who have worked in the North Pole. So,
There are actual bears and like caribou and all this wildlife around you. So
wow, 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 wow.
Delikado ba?
You should,
yes, you have to carry a bear spray if you go outside the site.
wow. You should share some pictures of those of your adventures in the North Pole sometime.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice. All right. So thanks for sharing even the work tips. Those are really very helpful, especially the part where I really like the part where you said about respecting your coworkers' boundaries. You have to keep those things in mind, especially now that we're mostly working from home now. So that's really good. So we'll start with the Q&A na at this point. So we'll do this in a round robin cycle in a way. I'll ask the question. I'll ask the first question. Vicky will ask the next question, and then we'll pick a question from the audience on the chat. So I think we already have a few questions here actually on chat that yeah, everyone seems to be very looking forward to hearing from you about these other things. All right, so my first question is, when did you start using Python, and what did you love the most about it?
Yeah, so I started using Python when I was in a third year at uni, which is in 2014. So actually the first time I volunteered for Pycon was also the time that I started using it in my academic work. So I think that it was imperative for me to learn it because it was required in a coursework. But I eventually learned to make it my main language, programming language, because it's much more succinct than other languages that I've started programming in. So as a bit of a context, I learned programming first via C, and then Java followed after that. So at first there was a lot of problem around mastering the syntax and the concepts behind those languages rather than focusing on algorithms and data structures and actual problem solving. So with Python, what I found was that I could succinctly implement the solution to a problem. And it was much more elegant and simple to do that rather than worrying about whether I've misplaced my pointers or whether I cleared memory here and there. So it was really nice. And now that I'm a data scientist, it's like the primary tool of the trade. So you pretty much cannot do data science work without ever touching Python. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that, Christine. Right.
Okay.
About the next question.
The next question is, what were your main struggles early in your career and as you move towards more senior, mid or senior roles?
Yeah. So when I started, like right after I graduated from uni, it was the industry was very much early on in their data science journey. Like in the Philippines, there were only a couple of companies actually doing that type of work. So number one struggle for me was finding the right role and the right place to work in. So at that time, I couldn't really do that. So what I ended up doing was I had to pause my work and actually go to grad school to acquire more expertise in the work that I was interested in, which is data science, and eventually come back. And it worked out well timing wise for me because by the time when it was 2018, the industry had caught up with the need to have advanced analytics and like do machine learning and data science in their tech functions. So I had to wait it out and like learn more from an academic point of view in order to get the right job in the right place. The second struggle for me is actually being taken seriously. Maybe it's unique to me being a woman in a very male-dominated environment. I mean, it's not very much of a struggle in the Philippines. I guess I can phrase this in two ways, right? In the Philippines, there is a hierarchical sort of notion at work where when you're starting and you present ideas, it's not taken very well because you don't have the experience and the tenure to back up your ideas. So getting through the door and communicating your ideas to higher ups was hard because you're new and there's a hierarchy that you have to follow. In Australia, where I had started working, it was more of like the male dynamics within the organizations that I worked for. So one time I came into a meeting and there was this client and he said, oh, who is the data scientist? And he just assumed that my coworker, who was actually a BA, was a data scientist, whereas I was not the data scientist. So these sort of like biases I had to kind of grapple with, and just being taken seriously. Like as a newcomer, even if you have skills, you have to really prove yourself in order to be taken seriously within your organization. And now that I'm kind of in my, I guess, 3-year journey and moving into more mid level positions, my struggle is to scale out and not just be seen as a data scientist doing modeling. At this point in my career, I think I can do so much more. I have skills around stakeholder management, communications, project management, solutions architecture to some extent. So finding opportunities by which I could scale out is the challenge for me at this point.
Nakarelate ako dun sa part na not being taken seriously when you start. Matt, do you want to pick one question from the audience? Dami na, oh.
Yeah, actually, ang dami interesting questions. And
Oo nga eh, parang ayoko nang gamitin yung questions natin.
um, well, just adding a little bit more nga to what you just said about the issue about women, the struggles of usually with women in tech is, yeah, this is something na parang I've observed, and Miki and I usually have a lot of conversation about this then just amongst ourselves. No, parang yeah, as a woman, parang in tech, usually
You have
uh,
to
uh,
work 10 times harder.
exactly, and for some reason you always have to be proving yourself first. So it's a challenge for sure, but at the same time, it could also be a strength then, because I don't know, like you're basically just going to be exposing yourself more, um, leveling yourself up. So yeah, I suppose I'm just trying to like put another perspective on that front. Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, so it's time to pick a question. There's a lot of interesting question here, pero I think something that really aligns maybe with the show is something about this question. No? Parang I like this one. So there's this question by Sarah. So how did you manage to study at KAIST? Did you study as a scholar?
Oh, yes. So good question. I was able to get into KAIST because of a scholarship. So KAIST is quite unique in that they actually give all their students scholarship. So the Korean government is paying for you to study at KAIST, and it comes with a stipend. And while studying at KAIST, you can also kind of add on top of that stipend by working for a research lab and doing research work there. So your tuition is pretty much free. The stipend comes with like it's enough for the paying for the dorms, but you can earn on top of that by working for a research lab. So that's how I got into KAIST. Now, the process of getting into KAIST, maybe it's worth checking in their website for the actual details, but it had the least amount of barrier in terms of like entry. So in most universities, like graduate schools, you have like, say, for example, NUS or NTU, you typically need to have an English test and like some sort of GRE. But at KAIST, they don't do that. So you just have to literally give your CV, your recommendations, and a bunch of other documents that prove that you're a good student and in undergrad, and that's how you get into KAIST. So if you are interested in doing graduate school, I would highly recommend KAIST. It's very much highly ranked in terms of technology and engineering, and it's on top in terms of like research. Actually, in 2016, when I entered KAIST, they had just been in a competition that like within DARPA where they beat an MIT robot with their own robot. So it's a very advanced school, and I would highly recommend it as something that you can consider going into. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Yeah. I thought that question was really something that I don't know. Share the opportunities.
Yes,
uh,
do check the website. If you had specific questions, I'd be happy to answer offline after this. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn and email me about it.
right. Cool. Um, right. How about Nikki? How about you pick
The
one
next
more question from our audience, and then we'll do our last question after.
Okay. Ang hirap pumili, no? But I'll choose this one. I've noticed that you work end to end, not just from the data analysis side, but also on stuff like production in the cloud, data warehouse, etc. Other languages also love to pride themselves on that space. What do you think makes Python the king in this space?
Well, I didn't really say that I use Python exclusively all throughout the process. But at least for AWS, there are Python interfaces for working with the solutions that they have. So, for example, you have Python connectors and SageMaker, which is like the main machine learning solution for AWS is like built on Python and is adapted from Jupyter. So that's helpful in that regard. I guess it's these solutions cater to the fact that a lot of data scientists use Python and they're just responding to the demand for that. Yeah, it's just more of like it's driven by what's in the market. Eventually, if for some reason in the next phase or in the next few decades, data scientists start picking up Java, although the probability of that would probably be highly unlikely, but like for some reason, if that happens, I assume that a lot of these solutions will have to adopt and build connectors for Java. I mean, they already have actually, maybe some other language, maybe it's some new language that doesn't exist now. But yeah, so like working end to end, that's an interesting like part of the question. So when you are hired for a data scientist role, you're typically expected to just, build POCs, prototype models, I don't know, do exploratory data analysis. But I found that those jobs are actually like the junior ones. If you want to advance in your career as a data scientist, you have to do much more than that. You actually almost have to be a machine learning engineer, and that will be your edge. So being able to have visibility of the end-to-end process from both data engineering, data science, and then eventually the software engineering side of things is an advantage. And I would encourage anyone who's a data scientist now to actually branch out and add your skills, not just like modeling and being aware of the state-of-the-art algorithms, but being aware of like how to productionize your models and actually work the whole lot. Think about solution, not just a model. Your model is only 5% of the code that's written for like a machine learning based solution. So I would encourage you to look into that.
All right, Matt, for the last question. Again, sige, mag-react ka muna.
Sorry, nagre-react talaga. Yeah, I mean, parang similar siya sa with being a full stack developer in a way. So you're not just focused on one aspect of the development, but
and you can't escape JavaScript.
Yeah, you can't. So yeah, that's a very interesting thought. So yeah, even if you don't get exposed to it at work, that's something that you might be doing or you might want to do on your spare time on a weekend or something, no? Parang as a data scientist, parang you try to explore the whole stack of it, even if you're just at work, parang you don't get the opportunity to practice the other areas. Same thing with development.
Yes.
Okay.
Deploy your models in an API, host it online. I don't know. That's how I learned it. So
wait, may tatanong lang pala ako as a follow-up to the last, yung sagot ni Christine before our last question. We tried learning, we attended the machine learning class last year. And yung yung teacher namin said na you can't escape R. Even if you use Python, you will have to read code written by other data scientists na written in R. Did you experience that?
No, I've only used R in a learning context, not in like an actual work BAU context, because a lot of the state-of-the-art algorithms that we're using at work now is not written in R. They're written in PyTorch, TensorFlow, Keras. So you don't have to, study R in depth, I guess. That's just my bias because I started out as a data scientist at the time when Python was becoming the main thing. But perhaps if you talk to an older data scientist who are more experienced and have started working in SAS R in the days where machine learning hasn't been called machine learning yet, it's still like statistics. So maybe that's their different perspective on it. But I haven't done that. So maybe in the future, you might not need to.
Thanks, Christine. And Matt, you can pick your last question.
Okay. So, sorry dun sa mga yun sa mga ang dami pa kasi tanong dito, sayang. A lot of interesting questions though, but just to wrap off our session for today. So, last question is, what's your advice for fresh grads and younger generations trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I've had a lot of mentors, not really official mentors, but a lot of people I've met in the community who have helped me like gain perspective around that. So maybe I have 3 tips for you guys. So first one is don't be afraid to take risks. Um, I think that has worked really well for me from both getting into data science in grad school as well as getting my first job. So um, I was working at Globe, and the role was really great there. I was getting paid well from an entry level perspective, but I didn't feel that that was what I wanted to do for my career. So I took a risk. I quit that job. I didn't have enough savings, but I've managed to like get some funding and save my last bits of salary to actually afford to be able to go to grad school. Not just the ticket, not just the tuition, right? Because that's free from Christ, but I had to save up to go to Korea and get plane tickets and have my first few months paid for. So take risks and be able to have, I guess, some plan to get you through the next stage of where you want to be. That's the first one. Second is don't let rejections dishearten you. So here's a little fun story. In my last semester of graduate school, this was in 2017, I was deciding whether I should do a PhD in data science or get a job. And eventually I landed on the decision to get a job because I'm not rich and I needed money at that point. So I decided to get a job, and I was back in Korea in my lab, and I would maybe spend nights looking at LinkedIn, looking at every job website that I could go to get and apply for data science roles. I had sent out my CV to everywhere. Like, think about applying to the US, applying in Europe, applying in the Philippines, applying in like anywhere in Southeast Asia, whatever, and in Australia eventually. So I've sent out these applications. I've probably sent around 150 of them, and the return rate is probably like 10%. And I did like 20 interviews during that time. So most of it is rejection. And it's disheartening when you get that much rejection. But eventually, somebody will get back to you from the right company. And you will learn about the interview process. And as you do more interviews, you actually do very well because you have the experience. You can talk about your answer questions much better and actually practice the technical part of the interviews as well. So just don't get disheartened by that process. It's a learning process, and hopefully you'll eventually end up in a job that you like, and a job that will like be beneficial for you in the long term. So that's my second like advice. My third advice is to never stop learning. So in this career, in this field that we're on, every day there is change, and it makes me feel anxious because maybe after a year I become irrelevant, but to not be irrelevant in this field, you have to continue learning. So carve out time from your free time to do some learning outside of your work, because work is BAU, and probably you'll have less freedom to like explore new ideas because you have to get stuff done and deliver stuff on like a specific deadline. So carve out time in your weekend or maybe in the weeknights to do some learning. So in the past, I've done like Coursera classes. They were really great. I've done like courses in Udemy to prepare for my certifications. More recently, I've subscribed to Cloud Academy, is it? Yeah, so there's a service to Cloud Academy that lets you have a sandbox to learn cloud computing concepts. So yeah, just keep on learning. To summarize, first, take risks and have a plan to get you to your next step. Second is don't let rejections dishearten you. Third, keep on learning. That would be my advice for anyone who's starting out in this career.
Wow, great advice, Christine. Thank you. Um, all right. That's it for this show. Any last thoughts that you'd like to share, Mickey?
Agree ako dun sa never stop learning.
Never stop learning. Yeah. Especially, you shouldn't be expecting your work to provide you with the exploration of your career that you need. So you really need to carve the time for that. No?
Yeah.
Expert advice from
From a data scientist.
talagang alam mo ang dami ng pinagdaanan nitong taon to. All right, so that's it for our show, and thank you everyone for joining us. So there's
And for
over
contributing
20
your questions.
and contributing your questions. Those who these questions na hindi nasagot, but still thank you for asking them. Yeah, that's it, and hopefully we'll see you on the next show.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend, everyone, and have a great weekend, Christine, and
weekend.
good luck with adulting.
For you guys who wanted to ask questions, I can answer them on LinkedIn if you send me a message. I'll find time to answer them. Yeah, so add me on LinkedIn or send me an email. Lastly, actually, I want to say that I'm interested in doing more talks on tech, especially data science, machine learning, and also doing pro bono work. So if anybody here is working along those spaces, please reach out.
Oh yeah, oo nga pala, no? So, paano ka pala nila may message, let's say on
Yung
LinkedIn?
last slide niya pala.
Yeah. So I will put my email in this chat. Yep, so that's my email. Find me on LinkedIn and you can message me there and I will answer. So yeah, feel free to reach out, guys.
Oh wait, I'll just share that email for everyone. All right.
Oh, yes. I wish I send.
All right, so that's Christine's email. If you have any questions for her, again, so she's available for that. And anyone else who's listening, so Christine is open for volunteer work and more technical talks, especially along the lines of her passions, especially the
Women in tech and
advocacy.
Thanks,
Right.
Christine.
Thanks, Christine.
Happy weekend,
Thanks, everyone. Happy weekend. Bye.
Bye.